Hey everyone, GXVL here with another brand new comic book discussion, talking about the likes of TMNT Ultimate Collection Volume 1. And this is about the prime and classic Ninja Turtles, where I started it all. So instead of me watching Seth Rogen's Mutant Mayhem, I'm like, you know what? I want to watch something that is a little bit more up my alley. I say that because one of the YouTubers I follow and got me, motivated on losing weight was Jaxblade, and for him to talk about like that there will be some Ninja Turtle iterations that may not be everyone's cup of tea, like with the 1980s Ninja Turtles and Rise TMNT, and especially the one I just mentioned not too long ago. So those three, I'm like, you know what, it makes sense now, because I'm a little bit more fondness with the 1990s Ninja Turtle films, not including the third one. That one is ass, and to this very day, I still think it's ass. Yeah, me as a kid, I hated that one. But also, I really love the Ninja Turtles 2012 iteration. Now, for me to read this, I'm like, hey, you know what? It was definitely up my alley, and I thought it was pretty solid. And surprisingly, I thought this was really refreshing. Now, there will be spoilers in here, especially for those who haven't read this. So, if you want to not hear any spoilers, especially if you haven't read the very classic and prime series of the Ninja Turtles, then I would highly suggest to click off the video. Now, where I want to talk about at first is that the artwork looks pretty phenomenal. I mean, even for something that came out decades ago, I think it looks pretty good. Like the backgrounds, the characters, and the choreography in some places, they look amazing. I really like the attention to detail, and I like some greediness in here. It looks fantastic. And let me just point this, to zoom in and to draw April's eyes like this, I was like, okay then, damn. This is really good stuff, and I really dig this. And of course, you will see some other characters like a robot and the Triceratons. This is really good stuff, but I do think I'm not trying to bash it or disrespect it, but I do think there are going to be some instances where the characters look a little bit stiff, and that the face expressions may look a little off. But again, it's not too much of a bash nor too much of disrespect right there. It's something I just noticed, and what I do want to say is that the story writing for the most part is, again, definitely solid. It was easy to understand. But what I also liked about the story writing, and especially considering how much thought process went into this, considering there's an issue number right here that says 6, it took a really good amount of time for me to read this. In other words, it had a very good pacing, and especially it took a little slowness to this. So even if it may have a slow pacing read, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, because for me to still digest the information and the circumstances and scenarios and how the turtles started and how they began, it was very investing. It really made me care about the characters. Now, the other thing I do want to address is that yes, this is all black and white, and especially if you see, yeah, these turtles are in color, at least for the front, and having only red bandanas. But since, hey, I'm the reader here, and just only seeing everything black and white, I could just kind of use my imagination and headcanon that that it doesn't necessarily need to be these headbands. This is not me disrespecting of how it's supposed to be intended, because there is a colored edition out there. I'm not kidding when I say that. When I was even looking through Barnes and Nobles when I was trying to shop for other books, when I'm like, hey, so there is a colored version of this book, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, since Ninja Turtles is typically kind of popular, right? But I was like, oh, okay then, maybe for people, if they wanted to see how the colors are supposed to be attention, right? For me, I think I will leave it just as this, as black and white, on how it was originally intended. But of course, me using just headcanon to still pick up which turtle I'm seeing. So instead of usually seeing yes, one of them is supposed to be Leonardo with the swords, just headcanon and use a little imagination, like, hey, he's gonna have the color blue. And especially like the way they're speaking. If you have seen some other iterations, I'm not gonna ignore the other ones. Yes, there are the 2003 Ninja Turtles, and there was that 2007 3D animated Ninja Turtle movie. So like whatever the imagination leaves, I'm like thinking like, oh, this is how Leo is gonna sound in here. This is how Raph is gonna sound in here. This is how Mikey's gonna sound in here. Like, it just works for me. I really like that. So, again, like the information for me to digest, like it really works with the characters. But of course, I had to like definitely reanalyze. Like, oh, wait a minute, who's this? Like, oh, who's that? Who's that? And especially when they're not wearing their like bandanas nor carrying their swords, because in some scenarios, in some panels, they will look like naked-ish. I'm not saying anything like you wouldn't see them taking off their shells completely. Like, no, you will have to like definitely like reread some areas for you to like understand like which turtle is saying this, right? So it may cause like a little confusion, but the moment you reread it, you're like, oh, okay, then so that's Donnie and this is Leonardo. And the other thing I do want to mention is that like this is the spoiler part. So Shredder dies at the beginning of the book. Yes, so they actually tackle with the very origin and also facing up against the Shredder, and I'm like, oh, okay. I did not know facing the Shredder would be as I mean, obviously it was still hard for the Turtles to defeat him, but man, I was like, oh, okay then. Color me surprised by this, because after that they go on other scenarios, other adventures. They face up against Baxter Stockman with his Mausers, and then they meet up with the Krang. And get this, the Krang in this, they don't come off as evil as their other iterations. They come across as like, oh, we're just a little bit mysterious, and we're just trying to mind our own business and just trying to like study like the biology around Earth. We're not trying to like harm whatsoever. And I'm like, oh, okay then. Interesting, very interesting stuff right here. And then of course after that they faced with the Triceratons and meet up with this robot who used to be a human. And I'm like, okay then, all right. So yes, the story writing actually has a flow, and they actually do introduce other characters that I forgot to mention, which is Casey Jones. He's actually one of my second favorites, who is not a turtle whatsoever. While I may love Leo and even Mikey, he's my second favorite turtle, by the way. Mikey, Leo will always be my number one favorite character, and especially as my favorite Ninja Turtle. But as my secondary character who is not a turtle, that is Casey Jones, I'm like, hey, I'm glad that he gets some sort of spotlight, even if it's not going to be for a long run in these other scenarios and other stories I'm seeing here, especially taking place after the moment he was introduced. So as far as I know it, I would actually strongly recommend checking this out, and especially if you're not into like the whole goofy weird stuff, like the 1980s Turtles, and especially the the Rise TMNT and Mutant Mayhem. Like, if you guys are kind of like me, who's mostly interested on how like the Ninja Turtles were supposed to intentionally be like, and especially watching like the 1990 films, again, not counting the third one. But if you don't want to count the second one, that's fine. For me, I like the second one though, and especially 2012 series, then this would be definitely for you. All right. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I think this was definitely a at least 5 or 6 Dragon Balls out of 7 Dragon Balls. This has been GXVL signing off right now. Later.